Well, hello everybody. This is Craig of the Pacific War Channel. This is Echoes of War, joined here by my co-host Gaurav. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be back here and looking forward to this really new series that you've been teasing, and I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's I've been teasing it probably for over a year now, and I want to apologize to our long-term audience members who watch us on YouTube. My computer yesterday literally crashed. It's in the shop now, so I'm using a MacBook Pro to do this, and it's melting my leg as we speak. And I hope it's going to get through this recording. Stating all that, if you're not joining us on YouTube, this episode might be premiering on two different YouTube channels for that matter. I implore you to do so because we're going to be covering a subject that I think a lot of Westerners are completely ignorant about, even though it's the bloodiest civil war in human history. It's going to be on the Taiping Rebellion. It's going to be, I don't know how many episodes long. When I did a series for Kings and Generals on the Fall and Rise of China podcast, I think it was 13 episodes long. Definitely not going to be that long. I'm going to condense it as much as possible, but it's going to be a long series. I'm going to come back
I
and forth
think
with it.
I'll just give this maybe a little teaser to the audience. We're going to break the series into two parts, and we are looking to have a different series in a different era in between as well.
Yeah. And I'll just say it here because I've already uploaded the two first episodes onto a other YouTube channel that is known as Kings and Generals Podcast YouTube channel. Basically, for the time being, what I'm doing is all of the regular episodes are going to continue to be coming out on the Pacific War channel. But when we have these large series, I tend to put them all together, re-edit them, and basically they come out as kind of these documentaries, and I'm putting them over on that channel. So over there, we're going to have the Greco-Persian Wars documentary, and we're going to have the Battle of the Atlantic coming out quite soon. So I implore you to go check that out. And of course, before we jump into it, I want to say if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to my exclusive podcast series. You get early access to all the content I make and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And I just finished the recent exclusive episode. It was voted on by the people, and I'm really surprised of the choices I gave that they wanted this one, but no, democracy. It's on the Siberian intervention, and it has a strong focus on the Japanese element to that. That's all I'll say, because that's kind of my specialty. So yeah, we're going to be talking about quite a interesting subject today. It is both wacky and horrifying, as anybody who wants to Google the Taiping Rebellion, I think the first thing you'll look at is the casualties. It's ridiculous. It's impossible to ever know if the numbers are true when it comes to Chinese history, for that matter. But needless to say, definitely the bloodiest civil war in human history, I'd say. I can't think of
I think
anything
one.
else.
I'll just say this: with if you consider the five most deadly conflicts in human history, you just get a simple wiki.
Yeah.
Three of the top five are exclusive to China
Yeah, I
in
know.
the Manchu conquest, the Taiping Rebellion, and the Three Kingdoms period. And with World War II and the Mongol conquests, at least you could say a decent slice of the pie of the death toll was also in China.
Yep,
So China's been there for the five deadliest conflicts of human history.
absolutely. In this first episode, and I'm going to try to make these episodes kind of, standalones in their own right, because it's such a long series, but this definitely is going to be a good standalone episode. We're going to get into a little bit of the beginning of the Taiping Rebellion, quote unquote, but I want to talk about the foundation, which is, of course, the key figure in all of this that you're going to get to learn about. And the only way I can tell this story without it being very dry and boring is to tell it kind of as a story. So bear with me as I start taking care of hostage on this little journey. Now, our story is actually going to begin with a primary source. I'm going to put a little picture of him. This is the only picture I could really find that was decent of him, a portrait. And the year is 1852. The man that you're looking at is Theodor Hamburg, a young Swedish Protestant missionary with a thin chip-strap beard, and he was working in Hong Kong. He was one of the first Europeans of his generation to brave the Chinese countryside as he left the relative safety of Hong Kong, which by that time it's a British colony. This is directly after the first Opium War. and he began preaching.
And I'm pretty sure Europeans, the stock of Europeans as perceived by the Chinese is at pretty low at this point, to say the least.
It is dangerous, to say the least, especially for British. And this missionary, he goes and he wants to preach at a village about 100 miles up the Pearl River. It's quite far for a British missionary at this time. Hamburg was one of the first non-Chinese.
It, it kind of just reminds me of that story, right? Of that missionary who tried to go to that island of natives who have not had
Oh,
contact with the
jeez.
outside world.
Yeah.
It just kind of reminds me of that. Sorry.
God, that guy got brutally killed. Ugh. That island is terrifying. What's is it the Sentinel Island or what is it? I forget the name of it.
Same. I can't recall the name at the moment, but I recall the story so bad.
Well,
It
yeah,
just sounded like this.
that was a big story. So he's going up the Pearl River and he wants to preach at a village. He was one of the first non-Chinese to learn and speak a dialect of the Hakka people. Gaurav, I don't know if you have just a picture to show the audience. This is a
Um,
ethnic group in China,
yeah.
one of the 100 ethnic groups. For those who don't know, China is not a unified people. I mean, of course, the majority are Han Chinese, but there's 100
Um,
different ethnic groups.
this is just like one. It's a modern picture of
Yeah,
one of the Hakka people,
here we go.
and I think one thing I just want to call out: the Qing Dynasty, which is the ruling dynasty right now.
Mhm.
It's one of the few rare major dynasties of China that's not Han Chinese.
Yep.
I think uh, if I'm not mistaken, it would only be the Yuan, Jin, and Khitan dynasties that were not Han Chinese.
Yeah, despite me doing the Fallen Rise of China podcast, my knowledge before 1500s China is quite limited. I know probably as much as the average Joe, but I do know, yeah, the Jin was a Jurchen, Yuan is the Mongol, and most of them are, of course, like 90% of them are Han Chinese, but I would say that there's a couple that are these ethnic groups. And of course, right now it's the Qing Dynasty, so it's the Manchu, and they are a minority. They descend from, we'll call it Manchuria, to be not very specific, and they're not liked by the Han Chinese or any of the ethnic groups to be certain.
Shocking.
Yeah, they're the loathed, and that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about. Is the ruling dynasty of this Chinese empire is quite hated by its people. Now, the Hakka are kind of seen as, and I'm not trying to be mean, like a gypsy minority as they move around in southern parts of China. They're sometimes referred to as the guest people, and all of this, doesn't amount to anything important. It's just to kind of give a little brief description of them as people. They tend to be round-faced as a physical description. And Hamburg, he ends up converting a young Hakka man who is named Hong Xiuquan. I'm going to actually show a picture. One sec. A supposed picture, mind you. It's definitely not, to be sure it's him. You can actually check Reddit about that. No one's sure if this is a real picture of Han Xiuquan or not. And yes, it is extremely small and blurry. Thought I put it up just for, to say that we had a picture of him instead of a portrait.
Okay.
Now, Hamburg was surprised by Hong Xiuquan one evening as Hong Xiuquan began to tell him an incredible story. Now, to give a little bit of background information, Hamburg was surprised by this story, although the Hakka at this point were aware of, God and Jesus and all that as he'd been preaching to them. And the message of Christianity had escaped Hong Kong. It was getting through parts of China in the south. But anyways, Hamburg was listening to Hong Xiuquan recount stories of all some battles, armies, and congregations of large Christian believers, all being led by a heavenly prophet who was also a Hakka. This prophet claimed to be hunted by agents of the Qing Dynasty, and he was living in disguise under an assumed name. He was once kidnapped, but he escaped, and he lived in a forest for 4 days and a cave for 6 days. Hamburg confessed that the story the man was telling him was quite confusing, And here's a direct quote from him. "I could form no clear conception of the whole matter." Hamburg did not know what to really make of the story. So he asked Hong Xiuquan to write the story down for him so he could think about it. Hamburg thought very little of this story for over a year. Then in the spring of 1853, news came from Nanjing about a torrent of blood. Hamburg then realized Hong Xiuquan's story was very, very real. Now, I want to just pull back up this map because it's going to be very hard with the geography for Westerners. I'm going to do my absolute best to help out.
I mean, I don't even know where, I know Shanghai is like on the coast, but I won't be able to even broadly pin it correctly. So, yeah, the map is definitely going to be helpful.
Yes. Oh, one sec. Where is my map? There it is. Sure. Okay. So, news of a great upheaval in China reached those like Hamburg and Hong Kong and along the coast, where a lot of foreigners were doing business at this time. Reports of local uprisings and small-scale banditry in the countryside was never anything of much importance. This is China, after all. It was the same old news. Then Catholic missionaries deeper into the interior began to spread rumors of a larger movement led by a man known as Tuan De, or heavenly virtue would be the translation. Some said that the man was actually dead. He was killed by Qing forces. Others questioned his very existence. Without any concrete news, little attention was paid to any of it. They thought it was just bandits disrupting the production of, the silk trade and tea. This is a common problem back then. But when Nanjing, the southern capital of China, fell in 1853, this suddenly brought attention to all the foreigners that something very real, a very large civil war, was occurring within China. Now, those in the city of Shanghai were quite alarmed, and rightly so. Nanjing was very close to what was being called the Taiping Heavenly, the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. This is the rumors that were being spread. It was said that about 1 million rebels were flooding down from central China on a grand flotilla of commandeer ships to what was formerly, called Nanjing. Now it's being referred to as this
1 million on barges.
Yeah, 1 million. So Nanjing.
But then again,
yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just keep remembering this whenever my friend told me Total War 3 Kingdoms came out. The only thing he was like, elite cavalry with masses of peasants.
So you have to imagine these foreigners who are in Shanghai. This is predominantly where the foreign community is at this time because it's a great trade city. Of course, it's on the coast, and they're hearing that what was the southern capital of this entire empire is now being referred to as this heavenly place, and that rebels have taken it over. So it's quite scary. And Shanghai is very close to Nanjing, of course.
Maybe, Craig, you could just zoom in a little bit on this map.
Okay. Here, one sec.
Then.
Is it zooming in?
Now it's just
Okay, good.
It's zoomed in because now you can see the proximity of Shanghai to Nanjing and Hangzhou.
Yep. Here, I gotta zoom out a little bit again. Okay, here.
Yeah, so I think that's good enough.
It was very scary to say the least. So, okay. So like 1 million people are coming down the river, and it's scaring everybody. A ton of cities were being emptied, and Qing defenses were laying in rubble as these small local bandits were forming like a grand rebel army, and they were marching. Fear gripped the city of Shanghai. Communications within Nanjing were cut. Rumors spread that Shanghai was next to be attacked. Shanghai citizens boarded up their homes. Many of the Chinese fled into the countryside, seeking safety. The foreign settlers called for defenses to be erected, for volunteers to take arms. British, French, and American steamers began to bring men to try and man the walls of Shanghai. But there was no attack, at least for the time being, because apparently the Taiping rebels were not marching on Shanghai. They were going to go march on Beijing. Now, think about this. This is crazy. So that is the actual capital of the empire. Or you could say it's the northern capital. And it's the one that the Manchu care about. So, the Manchu are under threat.
They're from the north, so.
Yeah. A single British vessel went over to Nanjing in April of 1853. but brought back very conflicting news of what was actually occurring. It became the opinion of the British plenipotentiary at the time that these so called Taiping were, quote, nothing but superstitions and nonsense. Despite the scarcity of clear information, raw accounts of this apparent civil war in China began to get out of Shanghai and Hong Kong, and it was reaching the Western world. And The Economist at the time had this to say: a social change or convulsion, such as have of late afflicted Europe. It is singular to find similar commotions at this time in other places of the world, like Asia. The person who wrote this segment, and I'm going to bring up a little picture, is none other than this guy right here. It was Karl Marx.
God damn.
Yeah, Karl
Sorry,
Marx
could not
wrote.
resist.
Yeah, Karl Marx was writing on everything in the world because, that's what he was doing at the time. So in 1853, he was a London correspondent for the New York Daily Tribune, and he was writing about the situation in China, which I find extremely interesting because I'll give it away. The Taiping Rebellion as a whole is kind of the foundation of the Chinese Communist Party, and there'll be more about that later. He considered the quote-unquote Taiping Rebellion to be a symptom of China's integration into the global economy at the time. It was a result of Britain opening up China during the first Opium War, which was a brutal transition to say the least. And what was happening in China was merely a rebellion, and it was, quote,
It's why I say the tea is more important than coffee, because no one went to war for coffee, they went to war for tea.
yeah. He called it a formidable revolution, and one that demonstrated the interconnectedness of the industrial world. Marx further argued that what was happening in China would happen in Europe, and he had this to say: the next uprising of the people of Europe and their next movement for republican freedom and the economy of the government may depend more probably on what is now passing in the Celestial Empire, the very opposite of Europe, than on any other political cause that now exists. So it's interesting, to say the least, what he's writing about. The disorder that China was facing was caused by, of course, the opium trade and the exposure to the larger world. The old was facing the new, as they say, and Marx believed, quote, dissolution must follow as surely as that of any mummy carefully preserved and sealed in a coffin, whenever it is brought into contact with open air. And Marx argued that the Qing Dynasty may dissolve, and that it would not be limited to just China. The whole Taiping Revolution was, for Marx, Britain's fault, and now the effects of her actions overseas would come back to bite her in the ass. And he has another quote here. The question is how that revolution will have time to react on England, and through England, then upon Europe. Marx predicted the loss of the Chinese market because of the Taiping would undermine British exports, which he would be right, particularly with textiles. By the way, I'm just going to point out that at this time, textiles from Britain were, kind of picking up in China, but the Taiping Rebellion would be kind of killing that trade network as it was killing people. And we'll get into
Yeah,
this.
you can't have a demand for a good if there's no demand
Yeah, exactly.
generated.
And I'm now realizing I kind of have to explain this because, I guess we could have done a series on the first Opium War, which would better explain this. But
I think we can do that in the future,
yeah,
definitely.
The tea trade is not just important to Britain, it's kind of the foundation of Britain at this point. So the tea, the silk trade, everything that's going on in China, this is deeply impacting Britain and the global economy. So it's a big deal.
I think just maybe like a 20-second context. Britain wanted to buy tea, but they don't want to pay bullion, which is what China demands.
Mm-hmm.
So what they decided to do is they literally drug China with opium produced, and are also, because it just coincides with the rise of the Industrial Revolution in England, they are also using it as a means to export those machine manufactured textiles across the world to India, China, and everything. Keep in mind, Craig, and I learned this from your video, when the East India Company was running the show, it was not really a war on drugs for China.
Yeah. Yeah, it only got bad when the East India Company was dissolved. Well, when their monopoly was dissolved, because independent traders were just like, the East India Company had a fine balance. They knew how much opium to let in without kind of like really pissing off the Manchu administrators. And then when they leave and the independent traders come in, they just flood the market, flood the market. The demand, goes down, the prices go down, and yeah, it turns into a real shit show. And then literally they had an epidemic in China where everyone was addicted to opium and not working. And yeah, it completely destroyed it. I mean, it's only till Mao Zedong that the opium plague kind of ends in China. It's crazy to say it's that long.
Like what, 150 years almost?
Yeah, yeah, it's insane. Yeah, opium really, it's incredible how
I
much time
hope
it's lived.
they at least got back that hot air balloon operator.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, that freaking mission, yeah. So some people back then were kind of like saying it was kind of equivalent to the American Civil War with the slave trade, because we had the cotton market. Although Britain then went to Egypt for you know to get their demands met, so it's, I guess, not as much of a big deal, because honestly, tea production, there was tea in Southeast Asia, but China's interior had like the greatest network, and they were pumping out the most. So Britain really needed that to keep going. And yeah, the price of tea would spike in England, leading to kind of economic downfall, and it could lead to further revolution in England. This is what Karl Marx thought was going to happen. And he went on to say it may be safely argued that the Chinese Revolution would throw the spark into the overloaded mine of the present industrial system and cause the explosion of the long prepared general crisis, which, spreading abroad, would closely be followed by political revolutions across the continent of Europe. Many news outlets and intellectuals at the time had differing accounts of what they thought was going on with this Taiping Rebellion. Some made analogies, like I said, to the African slave trade in the United States with the cotton. And they were kind of making, the Chinese were being hurt by the Manchus and the slaves were being hurt by the American system. But no one had any explanation for what was actually going on, why there was a movement, what the rebellion was really about. And yeah, Theodore Hamburg had this story that he had shoved in one of his desks, which had everything written down. But at the time, he thought it was just kind of crazy talk. So Hong came back to Hamburg at a village just outside Guangzhou, or Canton, as it was called in English. And this time, the Swedish missionary knew who Hong truly was. He was, of course, the cousin and lifelong companion of the so-called prophet of the Taiping. Yes, that's how Han Regan knew about this story. So Han Regan was the only person to come into contact with a foreigner who had some first-hand knowledge of the Taiping and that of their leader. Hamburg and Han Regan then formed a very close relationship. Hamburg even got to baptize him in September of 1853. Hamburg then educated him in Lutheran doctrine, preparing him to serve as an assistant to foreign preachers and eventually take their brand of Christianity over to the Taiping over in Nanjing. And as they worked together, Hamburg kept asking Han Regan about this movement and stories about the man who had started it all. And he wanted to know, who was this man? Han Regan told him the man's actual name was Hong Xiuquan. Han Regan then told him the story of his cousin. So I'm going to pull up.
So the person is Honrigan's cousin here, right? The prophet, or
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what is the right term for using, so hence, just pardon the confusion.
Excuse me. Here, I just want to pull up a decent picture. Give me a sec. Unfortunately, I'm not going to use the crazy Chinese TV series live actor versions of this. I'm going to just actually get a portrait of him. And my computer is screaming its heart out right now. There, I almost got it. Ooh, that's pretty small. Okay, here it is. There's a portrait of Hong Xiuquan. So, Hong Xiuquan, who was 9 years older, had always been known as a brilliant kid. They lived in the neighboring villages, roughly 30 miles away from Guangzhou. Many of the villagers were also relatives of the same clan, which went back to the Song Dynasty. They'd once been grand high officials and imperial advisors. So it was a long family history of those being brilliant. Yet as time passed, they had all become quite poor, and they were the farmer class. One thing they did hold in great esteem was a small schoolhouse where Hong Xiuquan began studying the Confucian classics at the age of 7. He was extremely gifted, and he spent years memorizing the 4 books, the 5 classics, and all the other necessary texts required for the civil service examinations. When Hong Xiuquan was a teen, he was very well read on Chinese history and literature, and he even read ancient texts without any assistance, which would have been very difficult. His family dreamed that he would restore their family to its former glory, and several teachers worked without pay to try and provide him with the knowledge he would need to pass the exams to become a Qing official. As time went on, his education needs took him outside of the village, and his family got together all the money that they could to support the 16-year-old, who at this point was already trying to support himself as a school teacher with a small salary paid in lard, salt, rice, and lamp oil. Now, the key to gaining an official appointment in the Qing government was a
It's
court.
not too different. So,
Hmm?
it's not too different from Japan, right? I
No.
think you also mentioned that they used to be paid in rice.
Yep. Koku. As it was, well, that was the daimyo system. So the koku was the amount of rice required to feed a person was known as koku. And the daimyo, these are, I'll call them warlords under the shogun, who ruled their respected prefecture, or it was called Hans back then. They were given a certain amount of koku to give to the samurai and the warriors amongst them, and that was kind of the payment system. And it was a stipend system. And man, the Tokugawa shogun, I mean, that was a long, it went on for a long time. It kind of worked. I mean, it was associated
Without
with,
too much work, without too much wars as well.
yeah. And I can't get into the economics of Japan, but Japan was like one of the greatest exporters of silver that went to China, mind you. So it made sense that they kind of had the system because they really needed the silver to be exported. Yeah, the key to getting an appointment in the Qing government, as it kind of was the same thing in Japan, was passing the Confucian civil service examination. Now, I do have a fantastic little picture. Where is it? Hey guys, this is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Please don't forget to check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account over at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel, where you can join the ranks and gain access to a hell of a lot of goodies. At the base minimum, you get access to the exclusive monthly podcast, early access to all of my content, voting rights for what subjects I will tackle next, and at higher tiers, I have much more goodies to come. So please click that link and check it out. Sorry, I got so many tabs open. Is it showing up on the screen? Good. There.
Yeah, I'm guessing is this like those famous civil service exams in China?
Yeah, that's what it is. So the goal of passing this examination was shared actually by both Han Chinese and Hong Xiuquan. But the exams were extremely difficult. And if you failed an attempt, you'd have to wait a few years before you had another opportunity to take them. The exam process took 3 days, and you're shoved into a small cubicle in Guangzhou. Han Chinese never had much success, but Hong Xiuquan ranked quite high on the first day of the first attempt, and this was in 1827. As the grueling exam went on, he began to slip through the ranks, and by the end of the 3rd day, he fell out of the winner's circle. It was to be 9 more years before he could qualify again to take the exam in 1836. So it's pretty brutal, to say the least. And, well, Hong Xiuquan, he didn't give up. He took the exam a second time, and he failed. Hong Chinese likewise failed. But unlike Hong Xiuquan, he was not carrying the entire family's hopes upon his shoulders. So,
I'll just say one thing though: failing civil exams and passing on like what second or third tries. That's still a thing that goes on in I think pretty much every civil service today.
oh yeah. I don't know if you know anything about the exams itself, but it was quite crazy, to say the least, like how difficult they were. So
But it probably had to be given the amount of prestige like the civil servants had in China, and this is prestige, a prestigious position that's been there for what, easily since the Three Kingdoms period.
yep.
Like all these administrators were really sought after.
Oh yeah. It kind of, for lack of like to brutally summarize, it kind of was an examination to prove your capabilities of memorization and understanding of information. So you're reading like these ancient texts, and you really had to show that you understood them and you could like reciprocate them. It would have been very intense, to say the least. So Hong Xiuquan failed twice, and he succumbed to what anyone would understand as a mental breakdown. This mental breakdown is going to take quite a character. Okay, so in 1837, he has what is going to be his one of his first visions. So this is directly after failing the examination. This is going to be for the third time, because he went for a third time. He was greatly weakened by the entire ordeal, and he would be carried home afterwards. When he got home, he simply collapsed into bed, and he called for his family to crowd around him. He apologized to all of them, and he said that his life was over. He let them all down. I mean, he said this as he was closing his eyes. He lost all strength. And it's reported by his family members that they all thought he died. Eventually, he would wake up, and he began telling his family about strange dreams. In his dreams, a dragon, a tiger, and a rooster entered his room, followed by musicians and a very nice sedan chair. They all carried him away to a wondrous and beautiful place full of people who rejoiced when they saw him. And then an old woman washed him to remove all of his defilements from his body. Then a group of old men appeared, and he recognized some of them to be sages of ancient China. They opened his body up with a knife, they removed his organs, replaced them with healthier ones before closing him up. Not a trace of the incision could be found afterwards. And then he was escorted back to a grand hall where an old man in a black robe with a flowing golden beard sat upon a throne. The man said to him, "They take of my gifts and therewith worship demons. They purposely rebel against me, and they arouse my anger. Do not, though, imitate them." This man then gave him a magical sword for apparently killing demons, and he was told to never use it on his brothers or sisters. Alongside this was a seal and a piece of yellow fruit, which he ate. The old man then led him to look upon the people of earth, where they could see all of the defilement and the perversions and demons about. Hong Xiuquan's visions continued for about 40 days, and Han Regan was one of those who actually stuck by his cousin's side, listening to all of these bizarre stories. There were reoccurring
Uh,
characters. Oh, yeah.
as someone who doesn't remember anything of his dreams, like within 2 minutes of waking up, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, to say the least. I want to just one sec here. I gotta zoom out of this one.
I just have one question, if I may.
Yeah.
At the start, where you were describing that vision, was it actually like recorded like that? Because you mentioned it like the pig, the tiger, rooster, among those animals that he saw. They're very important for China since they rotate those animals in the year system. So
You
is
asked.
it really so? Probably like written afterwards or something to kind of make it more
Yeah, that's what I was
spiritual, you
going
could
to
say.
say. Yeah, so basically, it's as you can imagine it, multiple people have written accounts of what they think the so called prophet saw. It's taking on a character. Obviously, there's the ancient Chinese aspects to it, the Confucian aspects of it, and it's being, well, we'll get to it. It's being blended with some other religious doctrine. And here's a picture called The Delirium
It
of
sounds a
Hong
little bit
Xiuquan.
of a little bit of Christianity as well, right? Like in the way some of those
Yes.
extracts were described.
For people who know a little bit of their Confucian, if they know about Confucius and all that, you're going to see Yeah, okay. Well, I'll give it away, but it's like a blending of Christianity with that. But so Han Rian, he stuck by his cousin's side to hear these crazy stories, and he noticed that there was recurring characters in these dreams. One of them was a middle-aged man that Hong Xiuquan referred to as elder brother, and he traveled with him to far regions of the world to slay demons with his magical sword. The old man in the black robes at some points began berating Confucius for failing to teach proper doctrine to the Chinese people, and Confucius confessed guilt and shame as such in front of Hong Xiuquan. Those around Hong Xiuquan say he often would leap out of bed screaming, "Kill the demons," which would have been interesting to see, while he was slashing about wildly into the thin air. His clear insanity drew a lot of curiosity and amusement from the neighbors who came to see the famous sleeping madman. At one point, he woke up and he claimed to be the Emperor of China. Homrigan then said to Hamburg, his friends and relatives only replied that the whole thing was strange indeed, without thinking at the time that there was any reality to this matter. Eventually, Hong Xiuquan recovered, and it was said he was a completely different person afterwards. He seemed to be taller, stronger, more intelligent. He seemed to be more handsome, fair-skinned, and his gaze had, quote, become piercing and difficult to endure. He seemed healthier, and he quickly returned to his teaching job, and he prepared for a fourth attempt at the civil service exams. In 1843, he tried for the fourth time, and he failed again. That same year, Hong Xiuquan found a Christian textbook that a missionary had given him years prior in Canton, and he decided to read it. And upon reading the text very closely, he came to an epiphany. The book seemed to unlock the secrets of his dream visions over the past 6 years. He suddenly realized that the old man in the black robes with a golden beard was indeed God, and that the elder brother who had helped him slay demons was none other than Jesus Christ. The demons were the idols worshipped by the Chinese that believed in Confucius and Buddhism and such. But Hong Xiuquan's real brothers and sisters were that of the Christian Chinese people. Hong Xiuquan baptized himself, and he threw away the Confucian texts within his schoolroom. So, if you understand correctly, Hong Xiuquan is now under the belief that he's the brother of Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Sorry. Just couldn't resist that exclamation.
Yeah. Hong Regan officially became the first convert under Hong Xiuquan, and this would be followed by a neighbor named Fang Yuqian. And there is actually a statue. One second. I'm going to bring up a picture. So let me know if the picture shows up, because I can tell my computer's having issue changing pictures. No, not yet. Here, one sec. I'll do it again. There. So here's a statue of Fang Yuqian.
Yeah, just loading up. Yep.
Okay.
That's there.
So all these men were baptized themselves in a river, and they cast away their Confucian idols from all their classrooms. They were all teachers, by the way. The three men began to study together, gathering as many Christian texts as they could find. Hong Xiuquan preached to them, and soon others began to join the flock. Hong Xiuquan believed that the Christian Bible was literally written for him. It was talking to him. All of his converts first, the first converts were basically their parents, siblings, extended family members, and such. And it was not easy. For example, Hong Regan's older brother beat the shit out of him with some sticks for losing all of the students at the local school, because this was his job, of course, after the Confucian tablets were all taken away from it. Hong Xiuquan and Fang Yuqian both left their villages in 1844 to try and spread the gospel to other villages throughout the province of Guangxi. Maybe I'll bring up that map again. So every time I press share this tab instead, I think it doesn't work, so I'm going to have to manually pull up the map. One second, folks. Sorry, audio listeners, as I navigate this with a MacBook Pro that's melting my knees. There we go. So you can see that in the southern part of China is Guangxi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guangxi, right? Like next, just at literally the southern part.
So They're leaving their villages and they're spreading throughout the province. Han Regan desperately wanted to join them. He was a little bit younger, mind you, and his relatives, they forced him to stay and remain a school teacher because he was 20 years old and was considered he was too young to do such things. And they probably thought that these people were crazy. Han Regan was forced to bring back the Confucian texts and the idols so that his students would return to the classrooms. But he still was baptizing at least 50 new converts there. So he was still doing the work. So in the meantime, Hong and Feng were preaching from village to village throughout Guangxi, and the movement certainly spread. Autonomous congregations sprang up, numbering in hundreds, who began to refer to themselves as the God worshippers. They took the man named Hong Xiuquan, whom many met, and they proclaimed him their prophetic leader. Hong Xiuquan came back home in 1845, preaching the gospel while disparaging the Manchu. And alongside this, he was disparaging the Qing Dynasty as a whole and Confucianism. He said things like, God has divided the kingdoms of the world, and he made the ocean to be a boundary for them, just as our fathers divides his estates amongst his sons. Why should these Manchus forcibly enter China and rob their brothers of their estate? His religious movement thus became a political one. And
And I think what we mentioned at the start of this episode, the I guess this would be something that would appeal much easier to the masses, given the resentment to the king ruling class, I guess.
Yep. And I want to just say it here, folks, because I know a lot of my audience is American. It says that about 80% is in my analytics. This is not new to China. There has been movements with usually a religious touch to it that are used just as a means to rebel against the Manchu, because literally all these groups hate the Manchu. So the White Lotus Rebellion is actually one that happened around 1800, and it was very scary for the Manchu. It was like the first time in a long time that someone really threatened them, like a real uprising, and it's very similar to what we're talking about now. And the Taiping Rebellion owes a lot of its kind of precursor history to the White Lotus Rebellion, which I can't get into here, but it's definitely, there is an aspect to that. So,
It
but
was a relatively smaller rebellion by Chinese history. Like just a few 100,000 dead.
but it cost a lot of money to put down. But the thing that the reason why I bring it up and why it scared the Manchu is they couldn't figure this out at the time. Clusters of these White Lotus worshippers sprang up in independent places simultaneously. So they all said, basically what they shared in common was they thought there was an apocalypse and they were preparing to fight it with weapons. So it doesn't look good from the government point of view. And they all set a date, and in multiple places in China, they just sprang up at the same time. So this was quite terrifying for the Manchu, to say the least. But the year is 1847, and the god worshippers, they're around 2,000 strong, and it's mostly Hakka Chinese that are involved. They began to smash Buddhist idols and temples while they were, certainly pissing off Qing authorities in the area. Then in 1850, a pestilence ravaged Guangxi, and rumors spread that Hong Xiuquan's prayers to the Christian god could heal those sick with the infection. This exponentially increased their ranks, and the passing of the disease gave credit to Hong Xiuquan's religious magical powers. Yet, despite all of this, they were no army. Then some small violence broke out amongst some Hakka settlers in Guangxi province. The Hakka settlers were scrambling to find land and water rights, and they had long-standing local family grudges with other communities. A lot of unhappiness, and there was encroachments. This led to a small-scale war between the Hakka and other villagers in the autumn of 1850. The non-Hakka burnt the homes of the Hakka, and this led them to turn to the god worshippers for protection. Local authorities had already been suspicious of this religious sect, and they began to view them more as troublemakers. And according to Han Regan, Hong Xiuquan predicted all of this, and he was waiting patiently to make a move. As the Hakka versus the non-Hakka violence spread, Qing officials placed blame squarely on the Hakka, and they would send a detachment of soldiers to arrest Hong Xiuquan and Feng Yunshan. The god worshippers heard of the incoming threat, and they began to arm themselves with swords and spears to defend their leader. And yeah, this is identical to what happened during the White Lotus Rebellion. I'll just put that out there. The Qing detachment
It also
was...
sounds Sounds a little bit like the Roman Senate's initial reactions to Spartacus' rebellion as well.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. Yeah, sure. I can see the analogy there.
Because they just think it's just like a bunch of bandits, not really worth, investing serious time, resources, and troops into it.
Yeah. And the Qing detachment was easily overwhelmed and they were routed. Hong Xiuquan then sent word calling out for all the god worshippers to gather for the first time and to prepare for what he was calling the next step of their great movement. Countless members would sell their homes, their land properties, and they marched. The following day saw tens of thousands gather. The god worshippers and their leading class told the converts to converge on the town of Jintian. And it's said that about 10 to 30,000 stormed the town and they took it over. They were preparing for a rebellion. Hong Xiuquan began organizing the people into military formations. If you have a chance, would you be able to bring up just like any images of Taiping warriors, for example?
Sure. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
And I need to just find the correct tab because I forgot which one. I guess this is just like one example of it, like an artistic rendition.
Yeah. So,
And I think because ultimately, since a lot of these images would be created well after the rebellion, and
mhm,
given the religious aspect of it, as later literally be called the Heavenly Kingdom,
yeah,
this picture does kind of give that kind of aura, you
it,
could say.
it's a little over the top. Yeah, yeah. No, we'll get into that. So he's organizing.
I have a couple of
Yeah,
I have a
go
couple
through
of
them. I'll
images.
start explaining. You
Yeah,
just put up the
yeah.
pictures. So the Jin, or army corps, consisted of 13,156 men, and they'd be divided into 5 shi. These are regiments of about 2,500 men with officers. Each shi would be further divided into 5 yu, which are battalions of about 500 men, and each of these had 5 ci, which are companies of 100. Each ci had 5 liang, which are platoons of 25 men with a sergeant, and a liang was made up of 4 wu, which are squads consisting of privates and maybe a corporal. Now, this is for the Taiping. It's a rudimentary system based off of it's basically the same system the Qing use. And the Qing garrison in Guangxi was not particularly strong at the time, and they were actually dealing with a lot of other uprisings. This was 19th century China, after all. And yeah, there was a lot going on. Now, the Qing commander at Zhongzhou was named Li Denyuan, and he was leading the Qing forces to attack Hong Xiuquan's residence within the village of Hangzhou and this is in Pingyan County. It's quite a very dangerous situation, to say the least, for both Hong Xiuquan and Feng Yongqian, who were saved by reinforcements sent by one Yang Shuqing, who was a other god worshipper. And yeah, he's going to come into it later. There's a lot of very famous characters involved in this. And then a Qing force led by Zhou Fengqi, alongside his subordinate Li Jianyuan, attacked Jintian, where they would erect a siege of the town. Now, I'm going to be pulling up a little picture here. Unfortunately, it's in Chinese, but it at least gives you kind of an idea of the layout. Bear with me as I pull it up. Okay. So this is a map of what is going to be called the Battle of Jintian, or the Siege of Jintian. The god worshippers, or the Taiping we'll call them, are the red, and the Qing forces are in the blue.
So, I mean, just because I'm also just maybe seeing it as an audience member.
Mhm.
So, would it be fair to say the like blue circles that we can see on, like, say, the right hand side of this map, you can consider those as Qing army encampments,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
I think towards the top left of the map, like somewhere there, like where's that? That semicircle and then the blue line.
yeah,
I'm guessing that was the main siege lines
yeah.
of the settlement.
And a little bit of the history of the Qing. So the Qing military operated more so as a kind of a large part of them is more of an internal police force rather than they were not. The Qing military was not designed to face foreign enemies. per se. They were more so designed to just quell rebellions because it's China in the 19th century. This is like, it's insane. There's a rebellion every year. So they would have the Green Standard Army as like the predominant force in play. It's consists of Han Chinese, they're local guys. They're paid a certain amount of money. This is 19th century China, so it's very corrupt. There's a lot of embezzling and stuff. They're not a proficient military force, to say the least.
So just like they'll appoint a local official to just raise the forces, provide the funds. I mean, we have to speak theoretically.
Yeah.
And he's just supposed to use a local division or some equivalent force to
exactly. And what a lot of
I think a great example, I guess you could call it, is like the Byzantine dogmatas.
Yeah. And what these officials usually did is they would say, let's say that they have a roster of 6,000 men. They would hire 3,000 men and then pocket the rest of the money. That is a traditional thing that would happen with these commanders.
That goes on even today for so many other things.
Exactly. And this is particular in 19th century China. The commanders would say that they went to a battle. They wouldn't actually, because they don't want to, risk losing their men, their reputation. They would fake things. They wouldn't even arm their men. They would buy like bad gunpowder supplies, like everything you can imagine. It was very corrupt.
It also sounds like the Italian counter theory during those Italian wars. A lot of those guys, they would just actually be just not killing each other because they support mercenary laws.
Yeah, exactly. So these two commanders, Zhou Fengqi and subordinate Yi Juan, they're attacking Jianjian and they're erecting a siege of the town. The god worshippers anticipated this, and they actually ambushed the Qing forces along the way to Jianjian at a smaller village known as Taijiang, and this is near the Thistle Mountain. The Qing forces who were ambushed said that they were ambushed by both men and women wielding pikes and halberds. This is an interesting thing because historically it seems true. At this moment, the women were fighting alongside the men. There's just something that's interesting to this entire story because
and anyways, I think pikes, kind of like pike or halberd type weapons, are the easiest to kind of arm a quick militia.
So on January the 11th of 1851, Hong Xiuquan's birthday, by the way, the god worshippers proclaimed an uprising officially in Xinjiang, and Hong Xiuquan declared the founding of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom with himself as its new emperor, or better said, as its heavenly king. Feng Yunshan, alongside 3 others, were appointed kings of the 4 directions. And I'm not going to bring up portraits for these characters, but in later episodes we will. Feng Yunshan was the southern king, Wei Chonghui was the northern king, Xiao Chonghui was the western king, and Yang Xuqing was the eastern king. Eventually, there was also an additional king known as the flank king, who was called Shu Dakai. Interesting character, by the way. One of the better ones.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine how does the flank king go with the 4 directions.
Yeah, but
sorry, just couldn't resist.
It's interesting to say the least, but they do well, surprisingly well. These men would go on to control roughly 100,000 people in their own armies. It's that crazy. Hong Xiuquan ordered the god worshippers to cut off their Manchu coups. So the hairstyle of the Manchu was a single braid that was in the back of the head with the top of the head shaved. For anyone who has never seen these, a movie of this, usually it's always depicted in movies when they show like ancient China. So everyone was ordered to have these coups. They cut these coups off, which actually was known. Like every time someone rebelled against the Qing Dynasty, that's what you did. And it really put you out in public as, hey, that's a rebel right there. And it's very symbolic. And many of the Taiping would actually let their hair grow long and they wouldn't tie it up. And this...
Greg, just maybe just for the audience's benefit, I'm just going to quickly share.
Show the image, yeah.
I mean, just for the hairstyle, right, that you were mentioning, this is what you were referring to?
The Manchu coup, yeah.
Got it. Just did like literally a 5-second search right now.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. And as the Taiping grew their hair, like they would be called, they would look like barbarians, by the way, to the rest of the people. They actually got a nickname, and no, I'm going to butcher this, but the nickname was Chong Mao Tse, which meant long-haired bandits. So from 1851 to 1852, the Taiping army began to basically fight its way further north. And they were absorbing mostly, the poor, disenfranchised, the criminals, and anybody who kind of hated the Manchu. It was a blend of those seeking to be part of something larger than themselves. Maybe they were joining for the religious aspect of it.
Like, like when you said that slang of them being the long-haired bandits, it almost would be like, some Chinese source probably is just like how you remember the Yellow Turban Rebellion or the Red Turban
Yeah,
Rebellions.
yeah, exactly.
Someone's call it a long-haired bandit rebellion.
One sec, I want to bring up another picture. I hope this is the right one. Okay. And sorry, it's in French. So they're marching a bit north, and they're absorbing more and more people, and it really is a blend of anybody who hated the Qing, and again, it's very much like the White Lotus Rebellion. It's kind of like the 2.0 version of it. There was more rebellions going on at the same time. Like, for example, there was a rebellion known as the Tiantui, which just kind of merged. Most of them merged with the Taiping after the Taiping won this little battle at Jintian. And the Qing were actually much more busy with the Tongtui rebellion, which we can think of it as a peasant rebellion, for lack of better words. After the victory at Jintian, many of the Tongtui, they're joining the Taiping to bolster their ranks because they share a common, cause. And this is looking a lot more threatening for the Qing. So a local general named Rong led about 3,000 men, aided by some other forces from the Qing, led by another general named Li Yangcheng, and Zhou Fengqi was still around. The idea was simple. They were going to converge their armies to converge around the Taiping rebels to try and encircle them. This is classic Qing doctrine at the time. The three armies attacked the Taiping at, and I am going to butcher the name of this town, Duhuangjiangkou, on February the 18th. And as they approached the town from the west and the east...
Greg, just one thing. I know you shared the script with me. I had no idea how to even pronounce that town's name.
Yes.
You did a way more admirable job than I ever would do.
Excuse me. Dahuangjiangkou. It's a difficult one, to say the least. So they're convalescing upon them from the east and the west. The problem is the Taiping actually put up a minefield, and they ran straight into it, and they took hundreds of casualties by running into these mines. The Qing forces were a bit...
I'm sorry, what kind of mines would you have at this time?
Oh, yeah, so this is mid-19th century China. They have primitive gunpowder-like mines. So something, when you're referring to it as a mine, it could literally be just like a set trap that's being lit on fire, as they come over. But, yeah. But mines definitely... In the Taiping Rebellion, I don't know if this was the case in the American Civil War as much too, but during sieges, you would have to break earthwork walls, or in the case of China, ancient walls. So mining was like a huge thing. Like sappers was kind of one of the most important fighters you had, because you had to get through large structures that were made
you
of
mean like undermining the defenses?
Yeah, and then exploding from the underground. So yeah, mining...
I guess something's never changed over centuries.
The Qing forces were eventually forced to stop their offensive, and they had to hunker down for a protracted siege. And something that's kind of important to note is, this is happening right after the Opium Wars. So the Qing military system, I guess at this point we could just bring it up. If you could bring up some pictures of like first the eight banner army to begin with.
Just one moment. I have some images of that. I think this would be the banners, but I have no idea what is this a good example of the banners?
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to come up. Yeah, that's perfect. So that's the 8 banners of the 8 banner army. And by the turn of the 19th century, this is like, they're not like a real military force. It's basically ceremonial. This was important during, the time of Nurhaci, when he was conquering the Ming Dynasty. But these are kind of like we'll call them the ceremonial guards of the imperial, the imperial forces in Beijing. They don't really fight much unless
Chocolate
in desperation.
soldiers.
Chocolate soldier is perfect. Now, if you can, could you pull up any images you can of the Green Standard Army?
That one I actually could not find. Is it the one with the muskets though?
Yes. They'll actually look blue
Oh,
in most pictures. The green doesn't. They weren't necessarily green, but it's a logo of a.
is it? Is this one an example of it?
Yeah, those are green standards. But
All right.
they have a more traditional uniform. But if you look up look up Green Standard Army. Osprey probably would have pictures of it. But the largest standing military force at this time is the Green Standard Army. And they were actually formed because the Eight Banner Army was just completely incompetent. And the Green Standard Army will be proven to be incompetent, and they'll be replaced soon by something else. But they're the majority of the military forces. And a little bit
One
of...
sec, I just got one image.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think this would just be like for an example of the green standard.
Yeah. If you look up the Opium War on the Wikipedia page, I believe it shows the British fighting some Chinese. That is definitely Green Standard Army uniforms.
From the first Opium War?
Yeah, there's a very famous painting.
Trying to find it. Just give me a second.
Here, I can look too. Well, here in the meantime, I'll explain a bit about the Green Standard Army. So the Green Standard Army can be seen
wait.
as...
I think I found that image. It's a small one. So let me just quickly share this.
Yeah, that's it. So that's the official uniform of the Green Standard Army, which you can see it's like a little bit of a blue kind of green tint to it. And they're...
By the way, I just because we were just talking about the Eight Banner Army, I just want to show something I found. Completely unrelated to the podcast, but you're just gonna like it.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm waiting for it to load. Oh my god. Of course.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh my god.
Eight banner theme of the Space Marines.
It makes sense.
God
that
Emperor demands this.
Awesome. So for the Green Standard Army, they can actually be seen more as a police force. Especially during the White Lotus Rebellion. They proved themselves to be extremely ineffective. The major reasons for why they were ineffective was that their pay didn't rise with the inflation that was going on, and it required them to, seek additional work to make ends meet. They were also widely dispersed to, stop centralized, to basically stop any rebellions taking place amongst them. This hurt centralized training more often than not. They were just like local recruits from all over the place. Rapid corruption.
With when you mentioned that they're not earning as much with inflation and such.
Yeah.
So most of them would probably be just transitioning to part-time soldiers.
Exactly.
With a day job, like
weekend warriors,
or working as bandits, or just working as a blacksmith or whatnot.
And as I mentioned before, there's rapid corruption going on. I said the generals, they would just say that they hired 6,000 soldiers for a contingent. They'd only actually have 3,000. They'd be pocketing the rest of the money. Opium addiction was rampant through the ranks. It really, really was taking a toll on Chinese society as a whole. And
the East India Company should have just continued its monopoly. Just say.
Yeah. So, to say the least, the Eight Banner Army and the Green Standard Army were unable to really cope with the task of quelling a real rebellion, and they would need to find new ways, alternate ways to build brand new armies to deal with this menace. And this is going to be the foundation of the fall of the Qing Dynasty, the Taiping Rebellion. And a lot of the things that are going to be happening throughout the series are the real reasons why the dynasty would collapse upon itself. Now, the Qing began to strangle the Taiping as much as they could. They just kept sending forces. But again, on the night of the 10th of March, the Taiping broke out and they marched east to a village known as Wuxian. and this is Mushan County. Qing forces pursued them, but every time that they got near them, they were simply ambushed by the Taiping. The Taiping and the Qing eventually found themselves in a stalemate near Sanli Dike, and in early April, the governor of Guangxi province, who was Zhou Jiangzhu, and General Xiang Rong, they rallied 6,000 troops to try and attack this village. But yet again, the Taiping rebels repelled them. By May, the Qing were losing more and more men when the Taiping broke out of another siege, and they were marching now towards Zhongzhou. General Zhang Rong then decided to coordinate a net strategy with the aid of another general named Wu Lantai, who was stationed at Langchang village. And they would try to attack the Taiping at a place known as Zhe Ridge. The Taiping fought the two Qing forces at the battle that would become known as the Battle of Daoao Ridge. And this is just due north of Langchang village. And General Wu Lantai's forces were completely smashed by this. Despite the major Qing losses, they still managed to encircle the Taiping for a fourth time. The Taiping would fight a war of attrition until about July, when they would pull out of Zhongzhou to a former base of operations that was at Mount Xiuqing, and this is in Guiping. The path going north was blocked effectively to the Taiping by the Qing forces, but the entire time that this was occurring, the Taiping were converting more and more to their cause. And it would just be a matter of time before they would march in large numbers upon major cities. And that's where I'm going to end this episode, because the next episode is so much information.
About that? Yeah, that battle you just mentioned of the Dua Ridge.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. You got to give it to the Qing forces for encircling an army that they were outnumbered by 3-1. Like,
yes.
Contemporary sources do say that battle had around 7,000 Qing soldiers and 20,000 soldiers from the Taiping Rebellion, like Heavenly Kingdom, as I will call them now.
Yes.
The fact it is encircling, despite being outnumbered 3-1, that's pretty cool.
Without much firearms, that's the issue. The Taiping don't have their hands on what we call military grade weapons, because in order to get military grade weapons, they have to start storming significant towns, like larger towns. Right now, they're in what you would call like bumpkin rural areas in Guangxi province, and there's not much in terms of like military stockpiles. But every time they defeat the Qing forces are abandoning equipment, and they're taking their equipment.
It's actually like Watling Street all over again in that sense.
Yeah.
Boudica's tribes had nothing, and after the sacks of Cameroonanum and Londinium, they managed to ransack the pretty big armories and pick up the fallen soldiers.
I don't
similar logic.
I don't want to give away stuff just yet, but this is a long civil war. Technically, it goes on till the 1870s, but no one really considers that because they're so small by then. But anyways, when it comes to weaponry, it's actually a very interesting time period, because I was making fun of the 8-banner army, for example, but one of the banners, the 8-banner army, are Mongols, who are still using traditional bow and arrow on horseback, a lot of them. It turns out in some of these battles, they beat the shit out of the Taiping and other forces, because gunpowder, you shoot, then you got to reload. If anyone knows their American history, like the Comanche Empire, for example, it wasn't until their Colt revolver came out that they were able to really overcome the Apache and the Comanches and stuff, because like the bow and arrow was still king.
I think and if I'm not mistaken, with just my general military history, the world is still predominantly in the matchlock rifle era.
Yes,
you're still like the old Napoleonic style, like the guns have to be reloaded after every shot, and it's a bit of a tedious process. Best soldiers could do 3 rounds a minute.
Yeah, although there are foreign forces, it's actually notably Americans who come into this, who have some interesting weapons that are a little better, but very much the minority. Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, just generally, I think right now you're just having like this breech loading rifles just starting to see service in Europe.
Yeah, and this is China.
I'm just talking about from a technological point of change in military doctrine.
Yeah.
It's a new weapon type that's being introduced, but it's not going to be here at this time.
And this is China. This is between right now the First and Second Opium War. The Chinese have a significant problem with artillery. They are using very outdated artillery pieces that are like the Western powers, for example, during the Second Opium War, desolate, just absolutely destroy
If I'm
the Chinese forces with
not
Armstrong
mistaken,
guns.
from your own Opium War video, a lot of the cannons that the Chinese were using against the British forces and all were literally like what you would be seeing, like, equivalents of bombard cannons and such,
Yeah.
hardly movable.
A large problem is the Chinese would have cannons that couldn't be properly elevated and move in a manner to hit, for example, warships. This is why during the First Opium War, they were so absolutely destroyed by the British forces. Is the British were just outranging them. They were outmaneuvering them with their warships as they bombarded their forts and their castles and stuff. So, yeah, the artillery was a
And it's
problem.
just easy for them to just move slightly out of the firing arc, and then you're like, yep, I can
Exactly.
just fire back without being fired at.
But when you send a bunch of Green Standard Army guys with matchlocks against a force that's like, what, 20 times larger than it with halberds, they fire their volley and then they're being charged. And they panic, they rout, and they die. That's what happens, really. Or they defect. A lot of them will defect too, because they're not happy with the Qing either. These are Han Chinese. Why do they want to fight for their Manchu overlords, right?
And as you mentioned, if you're so unhappy with the regime and you're already relegated to the status of a part-time soldier to supplement your income and livelihood, this is easy for anyone to just want to join.
So I was originally going to make this episode double in length to talk about what is the real beginning of the Taiping Rebellion, but it is such an intense episode with a lot of action that I thought it needed to be its own thing. So until next time, that'll be the March to Nanjing, as it's known. It's going to be incredible, the numbers. Stating all that, before I let the audience go, I just want to say, please, if you're not already checking us out on YouTube, please do so. We're showing maps, we're showing pictures and such. It's going to help, especially with this series. And consider checking out our YouTube membership or our Patreon account to get access to the exclusive podcast series or early access to all the content I make. There's also, polls that go out, so you get to vote on the next subjects that I'll be tackling. And stating all of that, thanks, Gaurav, for being a hostage to this alien subject. And
I'm actually pretty interested now, okay? I'm genuinely now getting really interested for the series.
It's going to get crazier and crazier because I don't want to give away the Taiping. It really reads like the Three Kingdoms romance stuff because the personal dramas are at the forefront of it with the Taiping, and it's going to get fun. It'll get fun.
Okay, I'm definitely looking forward to the series.
Till next time. The computer seems to...